2023 is upon us. It's a whole new year. It's a whole new year of hope for comic books that maybe things will get better. But today, we're going to take a look back at 2022 and basically talk about the very worst comic books of the year. Tomorrow, I'm going to point out what I think were the very best comic books of the year. But let's get the bad stuff out of the way first. There was a lot of crap in here. DC Comics were really uneven. They got more comics than Marvel in the best of list, and they certainly have a lot more comics than Marvel in the worst of list when I get to the top 10. There are no indie comic books on this top 10 list. We're only looking at the big two, but certainly Brian Michael Bendis' Joy Operations and Encina Grace's Rockstar and Softboy warrant consideration and were absolutely amongst the tripe delivered by comic books in 2022. We also had Shadows of the Bat from Mariko Tamaki, which is absolutely awful, but I think there was a worse Batman comic, and I also think there was a worse DC event series, so they kind of trumped that one. Marvel Voices Pride is very, very bad, but I think Marvel delivered a worse anthology comic book in 2022, so that one trumped there. And Spider-Punk is really awful. It almost snuck there into number 10, but it just couldn't quite crack the terribleness of Stephanie Phillips' Harley Quinn with Riley Rossmo on art, coming in at number 10. This thing was a train wreck the entire year. They actually made this a weekly event series for no reason whatsoever. There are no sales on this comic book for a reason. Stephanie Phillips has been exposed in 2022 as an absolute hack writer when it comes to superheroes. To mainstream comic books, she absolutely can't hack it. The actual star of the comic book is not Harley Quinn. She does nothing heroic. In fact, she's a bystander for a vast majority of the comic book stories and issues that Stephanie Phillips provided in 2022. Kevin is the real story. And the art by Riley Rossmo absolutely tanks this thing. It's so bad. And they actually moved into another book that we're going to talk about later on in this list. But Harley Quinn by Stephanie Phillips, absolute rubbish. If you love that comic book, I don't know what to tell you. You just have really bad taste in comic books. Let's get to number 9, Superman Son of Kal-El from Tom Taylor. Canceled after only 18 issues, despite worldwide publicity regarding John Kent, the heir apparent to Superman, coming out as the first bisexual Superman. Tom Taylor was on CNN and every other news network in the world talking about how great this comic book was. People did show up. They actually bought the issue. They took a gander, and guess what? Comic sales tanked. Through 18 issues, John Kent as Superman basically does nothing. Absolutely insane that he only defeated Bendix in 18 issues of a comic book series. And he never fights anybody because this isn't a superhero comic book. This is a gay coming-of-age romance comic book disguised as a superhero comic book. That's why everyone hated it. It was so slow-paced. It was so boring. John Kent could have been the breakout star for DC Comics in 2022. But Tom Taylor, he did what Tom Taylor does. He ruined his opportunity, and he destroyed a character, got the series canceled, and now he's back to the drawing book. Coming in at number 8, Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths, Josh Williamson. I like Josh Williamson, but I don't think he actually knew what story he wanted to tell here. I don't think he ever intended to tell a direct sequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths. It doesn't feel like that. In fact, I don't think Joshua Williamson wanted to tell a crisis event. That's why the book never feels like a crisis. I think he wanted to tell a Nightwing and the Teen Titans versus Deathstroke and the Legion of Doom story. Unfortunately, he had to cram all this other crap in there. Nothing ever made sense. He took the easy way out for every single big explanation that he had to make how any of this stuff ever worked. When it's time to defeat Pariah, Jace Fox just shows up and says, "Oh, I fixed it." And then they defeated him. It was that simple. There were a couple of moments in this comic book that were actually impactful and could have been big deals to the future of John Kent and some of these other legacy heroes DC Comics are trying to get over. Unfortunately, the story got in the way of all those moments because it absolutely sucked, and it wasted the cardinal sin in comic books. It wasted amazing Daniel St. Briard, who should be one of the real up-and-coming artists. He should be on the verge of superstardom. He just wonderfully illustrated a crisis event for DC Comics, and it means nothing because the story ended up sucking. Coming in at number 7, Axe Judgment Day from Kieran Gillen, Al Ewing, Tom Brevoort. I'm going to blame him a lot for this one because I believe he was the lead editor. This is an Eternal story arc, and they decided to cram it into being an event series. There's a reason Kieran Gillen's Eternal series got canceled early, because no one was reading it. It was boring, it was trite, and no one likes the Eternals. He tried to get them over in this series, and he absolutely breaks another cardinal rule in comic books. you have all these things happening, and none of it makes sense, right? You've got the progenitor, and he's passing judgment on all these characters individually. You live, you die, and all this kind of stuff. It's supposed to be a big deal, right? And then we get to the big moment. The progenitor's like, screw it. You're all dead. I've decided you're all going to die. And it was just so stupid. And it made no sense. It was just all a waste of time. But the biggest waste of time is when we get to the end and the progenitor starts crying because he's been shamed and decides to make everything the exact same way it was before. It was a complete waste of time, a complete waste of like $80 or $90 on the part of Marvel Comics, but that's what they do. They screw you out of your money with worthless events these days. Kieran Gillen brought nothing but absolute dog doo with Hack's Judgment Day. That thing sucked ass. Ugh. But at least it didn't waste Daniel Samper art. That's an even bigger sin, maybe. Coming in at number 6, Edge of Spider-Verse number 4 anthology story. There's some bad stuff in here, specifically the spider-themed princess story that absolutely sucks. But really, it's the Sun Spider story by T. Franklin that takes the cake. We would have been talking about T. Franklin's Harley Quinn Eat Bang Kill Tour story that finished up in 2022, but Sun Spider by T. Franklin is so much worse. This handicapped superhero sits there and pisses and moans the entire time about people not helping her after she tells people not to help her. Not to mention, the design is stupid. The name is even dumber. Charlotte Weber for a spider-themed character. Are we going a little bit too on the nose on that one? A little cutesy-wootsy on that? T. Franklin is an absolute hack. I don't know why anyone continues hiring T. Franklin. Wait, yes, I do. There's a lot of boxes to be checked by T. Franklin, but none of them include being a competent, at the very least, comic book writer. She's an absolute train wreck, not only as a writer, but go check out her YouTube channel. You will see a person that has no idea how to function in reality right now, and that's why her comic books absolutely suck. I don't know why they keep hiring T. Franklin, but everything she touches turns to crap. Even that stupid Archie comic book she did sucked ass, no doubt about it. Coming in at number 5, Marvel Comics What If Miles Morales number 4, Yehudi Mercado writing this one, but I lay most of the blame on the editorial team, mostly Tom Groneman, as well as Nick Lowe, the actual group editor of Spider-Man. I do not know what they were thinking with this What If Miles Morales was Thor comic book, basically going out there and displaying every negative racial stereotype and putting it all over Miles Morales as Spider-Man. They have had enough trouble getting Miles Morales over, and it's insane just how much blowback they got for this comic book. Whoever thought putting By Odin's Fade into a comic book starring Miles Morales, what did they think was going to happen? People were just going to laugh at all the lowbrow humor and be like, no, that's right. Miles Morales, he's black, so he's got to be just a racial stereotype. He can't be an individual character. He can't be unique. How about we stop trying to make Miles Morales every other superhero in the Marvel Comics universe, including Spider-Man himself, and let him be something new, something different. People like the character. People respond to the character. But for some reason, Marvel Comics, who created the character, can't get him right. The worst example of all, Nick Lowe. What the hell were you thinking? Greenlighting What If Miles Morales number 4, where they portray him as Thor and just turned Asgard into a brook and all kinds of this stuff. And there was nothing redeeming about this comic book. And I agree with the people that said Marvel Comics was out of bounds releasing this comic book. And it sucked ass too. Coming in at number 4, Batman Fortress from Gary Whitta, which includes the worst page in DC Comics history featuring Batman. We have, I guess, a group of peaceful protesters in the mind of Gary Whitta, stealing, looting, rioting, burning stuff down. Batman sees this and he decides, I'm not really going to do anything about it because I'm really mad at the man. Despite being a billionaire business owner myself, I've decided that I just want people to go around Gotham burning things up and breaking the law. Does that sound like Batman to you? Certainly doesn't sound like Batman to me. We also get the worst version of Jackson Hyde I've ever seen out of Gary Whitta. This dude actually took a Bruce Wayne-led Batman series and threw it outside the top 150 selling comic books in the industry. Think about how incompetent you have to be Gary Whitta and actually achieve that feat. I didn't think it was possible, but when you write that bad, you can even destroy sales on Batman. Coming in at number 3, the final event of the year that we're going to talk about, Trial of the Amazons from CLOONRAD, Vita Ayala, Stephanie Williams, and Joelle Jones. With a lineup like that, what could have gone wrong with this one? Wonder Woman has not been treated well by DC Comics for years upon years upon years. Making it worse, when we came out of Infinite Frontier, they put CLOONRAD on the book, and then they decided they wanted Vita Ayala and Stephanie Williams to really start fleshing out Nubia to become the new queen of the Amazon. All the Nubia stuff leading up to the trial of the Amazons is pretty much embarrassing across the board, from Vita Ayala and Stephanie Williams. The Wonder Woman stuff, where she died and went to Valhalla and all that stuff, equally as embarrassing. They all had no sales whatsoever. So what do you do if you're DC Comics? Let's turn it into an event series and have just a bunch of broads sitting around talking for about 40 pages an issue for 2 or 3 months straight. I can't imagine anything being more boring than this, but they also did the exact same thing that Marvel Comics did with Axe Judgment Day. By the end of it, the only thing that really happened that stays happened is Hippolyta died because Nubia needs to be the new queen now, and we find out Artemis did it. Ooh, there's a big cliffhanger on the end of it. What are they going to do with Artemis? 2 months later, they release a one-shot. Artemis didn't do anything wrong. Absolute tripe across the board. Wonder Woman is one of the greatest heroes in the history of comic books, one of the most important heroes in the history of comic books, and certainly deserves a better fate than CLOONRAD, Vita Ayala, and Stephanie Williams. Joelle Jones is a great artist, but she ain't much of a writer. See also Wonder Girl. That thing absolutely sucked. What could possibly be worse than Trial of the Amazons? I say Marvel Comics Marauders from Steve Orlando coming in at number 2. Steve Orlando was not the worst writer in the history of the world when he was at DC Comics. Apparently, he had a lot of oversight from their editorial staff. If you go out and check some of the interviews from Steve Orlando, one of the reasons that he needed to leave DC Comics and come over to Marvel because he didn't like the amount of feedback he was getting from editorial that were actually saving his stories from him. Now that he's over at Marvel and he's got no oversight because he's working with Jordan White and his cabal of doofuses, dumbasses over in the Marvel Comics X-Men office, Steve Orlando is as bad as we thought he could be. Commanders in Crisis last year was not an aberration. See Marauders. It's actually worse. I don't know why they keep giving Steve Orlando work at this point. These comic books don't sell, but the worst thing about this has the worst self-insert character of all times. His name is Somnus. Steve Orlando's gay, so Somnus also needs to be gay. Guess what his mutant power is? He can put other mutants to sleep, and he does so with another male mutant, and he bones him for 1,000 years. Basically, he went out and date raped a mutant for 1,000 years, and Steve Orlando thinks he's a hero. That tells you what's wrong with Steve Orlando, X-Men, Jordan White, everything. Marvel Comics, this thing needs to be canceled soonest. Absolute travesty that they would give Steve Orlando any more work. That guy has been exposed harder than anybody, except for our number 1 person on the list in 2022. You knew who number 1 was going to be. What was it going to be? Tim Drake Robin? Or was it going to be Dark Crisis, Young Justice? I couldn't decide. Meghan FITZMARTIN is the number 1 worst comic of 2022. I didn't think you could do any worse than Dark Crisis, Young Justice, her fuck you to Peter David and DC Comics' Young Justice team, but then we got Tim Drake Robin, which features more Riley Rossmo art. Of course, Meghan FITZMARTIN writing for a modern audience over at DC Comics. Tim Drake, despite 30, 40 years of history, needs to be a gay character now. He's completely femmed out, and they walk on twinkle toes all the time. Meghan FITZMARTIN is the worst thing to happen to comic books since Bill Jemas decided that he was a comic book writer, the Draco and X-Men, and All-Star Batman and Robin. This thing is an utter disaster. I can tell you one thing for certain about Meghan FITZMARTIN. I do not know her. I've never met the lady, never spoken to her. But I know she fucking hates DC Comics. She hates the universe, and she certainly hates the characters. And she hates the fans most of all. She also hates Peter David, who's a great man who did great things on Young Justice. She went out of her way to take a giant shit on one of the best comic runs in DC Comics history. And DC Comics allowed that. And then she went out of her way to take one of the real legacy characters at DC Comics that has potential to do something and just destroy him sight unseen because she could. She decided that was her responsibility to go out there and just destroy things at DC Comics. There's no doubt in my mind, Meghan FITZMARTIN is the worst comic book of 2022. No doubt whatsoever. This is not the first time I've actually counted down the worst comic books of the year. In fact, if you want to hear just how bad 2021 is, I did the countdown last year. Definitely check this out if you want to hear just how bad last year was in comparison to 2022. If you don't see the video here, there's also a link in the video description.